Hi, friends. Welcome to the Mobile Bev Pros Podcast, a podcast dedicated to providing mobile bar and event professionals with the information they need to succeed. I'm your host, business coach, and founder of the Mobile Bar Academy, Sarah Murphy. In each episode, the Mobile Bev Pros team will bring you industry experts, information, anecdotes, and opinions with the goal of assisting you in building a profitable, sustainable, and successful business that supports you in creating wealth. I'm excited to share with you today's episode, so let's get started. Hello, and welcome back to the podcast. Today I have a number of different topics that I want to talk about, and they are a little bit all over the map, I think. So I'm just going to give you a high-level overview of what I want to dive deeper into on today's episode, and then I will go one by one through the different topics. The first thing that I want to talk about today is THC Beverages, and this came up because I've been increasingly getting questions from clients as to how to handle the requests for THC beverages from hosts, as well as how to serve responsibly. And in my investigation there, have found that there was very little official guidance. And through my own personal experiences, which I'll share with you, realized that there definitely needs to be. And so I do have some high level, not approved by anyone official, because it doesn't seem like they're interested in providing official guidance, recommendations for the serving of THC beverages. The second thing I want to talk about is the power and importance of vulnerability. And this came up in a coaching call today, and it's also a lesson that I learned probably the hard way back in 2023 as to how uncomfortable vulnerability is, but to how powerful it is and how utilizing it can actually speed up momentum and results within your business or personal life, but specifically your business. And then the last thing that I want to talk about today is the neuroscientific formula for goal achievement and quote unquote manifestation. If you are familiar with the Mobile Bev Pros ecosystem, you know that I have a fascination and dedication to strategy and planning for goal achievement. Not only do I regularly host quarterly strategy webinars, I hosted the Brew Retreat in January in Puerto Rico that was organized entirely around creating an annual plan to help achieve your most audacious goals. In previous years, I have hosted not only annual strategy sessions that are either half day or full day, but also webinars that walk people through my formula for breaking down big goals into action items and tasks. So this is something that I have a lot of love around. And in today's episode, I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty, but I am going to give you a really simple 6-step process that is proven through neuroscience to help people achieve their goals. And so that's what's on the agenda today. But let's start off by talking about THC. Now, I live in Tennessee, and about 2 years ago, give or take, we started to see THC-infused beverages be released on the market. And I was a little shocked at the time because I didn't think that that was legal in Tennessee. And someone explained to me that they're Delta 9, Delta 8. I don't know what any of that means, other than they started appearing in liquor stores. Now, they were locked behind like coolers, or they were behind the desk and you had to go through an employee to access them. That's no longer the case as of relatively recently, but needless to say, they have been around for a couple of years. And so hosts and guests naturally are wanting to start serving these things at their events. And I've done videos and posts on social media in the past that were kind of like, hey, listen, these are not covered by your liquor liability insurance, so do what you will with that information. But they're not going anywhere. And so not long ago, I was at an event and I was drinking my margarita, as one will, and someone offered me one of these THC beverages. It was a 5 milligram. I'm not really familiar with my tolerance, and I asked, is that a lot? And they were like, no, this is not a lot at all. And so I drank the beverage, and I felt great for about 90 minutes. And then I started talking to trees and traveling interdimensionally. And it was quite the experience. And I've since learned relatively recently at a Q&A call for the Mobile Bar Academy, another client mentioned this is called cross-faded. Now, I thought they meant cross-faded as an FATED, but a friend of mine shared with me that it's faded as an FADED, as in fade to black, which while I didn't fade to black, I was a mess. This really got me wondering, how does one serve these responsibly? Because as you know, as a mobile bar tender, as a mobile bar owner, it's our legal obligation to be good stewards of the people that we are serving. When we serve controlled substances, we know that doing so is going to impair their judgment. So they borrow our judgment while they're consuming these controlled substances. But if I don't know how to judge, how to serve these things responsibly, then both parties are at a disadvantage. So I called the Tennessee ABC and I asked them what guidance they had for bartenders who are being asked to serve these THC-infused beverages, to which they said, we have no guidance, we do not regulate those products. At that time, those products were being regulated by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And so she recommended that I call them. So I did, and they told me, we don't regulate bartenders, so call the ABC board for further guidance as to how to serve these responsibly alongside alcohol. So we were in a little bit of a pickle here regarding guidance. I envisioned the meme with the different Batmans, like all pointing at each other. So from here, my guidance was just avoid it at all costs, given the fact that we can't guarantee that we can serve it responsibly. However, more and more of these THC beverages are coming on the market, and more hosts are asking for them to be served, and more mobile bartenders are feeling pressured to do so. And so I figured no guidance is definitely not the right answer here. And potentially the varying governing bodies will catch up and start to issue guidance in relation to this. But for now, I polled the audience and I asked people who are more steeped into the THC cultures, potentially from California or Colorado, who've been doing this for a long time, as to what their advice is and what their guidance is to their clients when walking people through menu selection. And the best advice that I was able to source was to take it slowly, specifically to propagate the menu with low THC beverages. So I thought 5 was pretty low given the feedback I got from that one person. Apparently 5 milligrams can be quite high for someone who doesn't have a built-up tolerance or someone who is also consuming alcohol. So the recommendation there was to go down to even like a 2.5 milligram. And that felt better to me, especially for events, because if you are drinking a 2.5 and it's an open bar, you can always come back for another one, right? And they compound over time. But that way, if someone doesn't know their tolerance, they're not necessarily being handed a 5 milligram or a 10 milligram and then finding out the hard way when they're talking to trees. So if you have a host who is insistent about having a THC infused beverage on their menu, my advice here would be to guide them towards a low THC beverage, such as a 2.5. And then when behind the bar, if someone expresses interest in the THC beverage, gauge their tolerance level. Most people probably know themselves. I knew I had no experience with THC beverages. And potentially the person who handed me the 5 milligram should have at least provided a little bit more guidance as to how to responsibly consume said beverage, especially knowing that I had already had the margarita. But engaging the guest in a little bit of conversation around their tolerance level, do they drink these frequently, have they had anything else to drink, will help us as bartenders better guide them through the selection and the serving of these beverages. Like I said, I don't have a ton of guidance or expert advice on these, just what I've been picking up through the research that I've done, but I figured some guidance and advice is better than none, and I really found the suggestion and recommendation to keep to low milligram beverages and then to monitor drink consumption to be the best advice out there. Okay, the next topic here is regarding the power of vulnerability. And this came up in conversation with a one-on-one coaching client because she was sharing how grateful she was for the support and how much momentum that she has built in her business since we started working together, and how she realized upon self-reflection that it's because she felt safe to share her failures and her struggles. And that's not something that she feels safe doing on a daily basis or with most people. And the thing I reflected back to her is that the reason that vulnerability is so powerful in progress is because you can admit where you need support. And when you're honest about where you need support, You can borrow the expertise and the minds and the genius of others around you who feel aligned to support you with where you're struggling. So I, for example, have a very strong background in strategy. So if you have a goal, but you're not quite sure how to get there, I can support you there. So if you feel stuck, if you feel like you have been circling the drain over and over and over again, the key to getting unstuck may very well be vulnerability. Who can you tell and talk to about your struggles or where you feel stuck? They may not be the person to support you, but they may know someone who can support you, because there's nothing rewarding about staying stuck. There's no benefit to your pride in staying stuck. And there's certainly no benefit to your business in staying stuck. And in my experience, not only does vulnerability help you get unstuck, it also helps you feel supported and like you're part of something greater than yourself, a real community that enriches and nurtures entirely different parts of our psyche, allowing us to feel connected and more resilient as a result of knowing that we don't just have to rely on our own strengths, our own genius, and our own capabilities to get where we're trying to go. So the question that I would love for you to reflect on is, where, either in your personal life or your business, can you use the power of vulnerability to help you build momentum, achieve your goals, and tap into the genius of the people around you? You might be surprised at what comes up. And the last thing that I want to talk about today is the neuroscientific formula for goal achievement. And now, none of this is going to be a surprise to you. I've covered individually each and every one of these pieces, some of them often together. But there's something extra valuable and potent in hearing something explained concisely and all together. The first step is often the hardest step for a lot of people, especially in this increasingly distracted world, and that is focus. I read a book last year called Stolen Focus by Johann Hari. Highly recommend as a great read on this particular topic. But also, if you either have been diagnosed or are self-identifying as someone who has ADHD, which is specifically talking about attention deficit, this is where you're going to spend a lot of your time reclaiming your ability and your power to focus. I reference this here a lot where I'm talking about people who have shiny object syndrome, or people who are going 20 steps in 20 different directions instead of 20 steps in one direction. I know how hard it is, and it's getting increasingly harder because there's so many demands on our attention. But if you can reclaim your power to focus, you are that much closer to being absolutely unstoppable. I heard the other day that attention is the new oil, and I don't disagree. Everyone is vying for your attention. I'm vying for your attention right now as you listen to this podcast. Now, only you can determine whether spending your attention here is helping you get closer to your goals or further away from your goals. But I'm fairly certain that everyone, including myself, spends a fair amount of their day-to-day allotment of attention on people, places, and things that are not helping you get to where you're trying to go. So step number 1, reclaim your ability to focus on what's important. Step number 2 is clarifying exactly what you want. When we get really clear on the goals that we have, it becomes a whole lot easier to determine what opportunities are for us and what opportunities are not for us, because it's easier to establish what's aligned and what's not. I'm going to be honest, anybody who jumps into any of my containers, one of the first things we do is I ask them, where are we going? What would success look like here? That process of clarifying what success looks like is surprisingly hard for people to enunciate. And if it's hard, it's likely because they haven't spent a whole lot of time thinking about it. And I'm not necessarily talking about what financial goals you have. You don't have to have a specific number, but you do have to have a specific destination. The third step here is to identify and bring awareness to the blocks that come up. When people identify or put words and clarity around what it is that they truly want, inevitably in comes almost immediately all the reasons why they shouldn't want that thing, or they can't have that thing, or all the obstacles that are in the way. And now sometimes it's obvious, like I don't have enough money. But sometimes it's not, and it's more like I don't believe I'm capable of that, or my mom always said I was bad at math and I'm going to need to know how to do math in order to achieve this, right? And so sometimes the blocks are really obvious and sometimes they're really subtle, but inevitably when you clarify what you want, there's going to be a part of you that immediately tells you why you can't have it or why you shouldn't have it. And I know this to be true because if those things weren't there, you'd already have it. Like some of it is ability, but if you had no blocks around ability, you'd have just learned how to do that thing. Some of it might be opportunity, but if you didn't have blocks about seeking those opportunities, you would have already gone out and done that thing. And so it's easy for us to say, I can't, or I shouldn't, or I won't, because it's hard to actually look and identify each and every one of those blocks so that we can systematically bring awareness to the blocks that come up. Now, we don't have to erase all the blocks to keep moving with this process, but having awareness around them will allow us to meet them when they come up. Oh, hi, I see you. You think that I'm not smart enough to do this. Why don't you sit over there while I figure out how to get the information that I need in order to do this, regardless of whether or not I feel smart enough to do it or not. These are the things that help us continue on when things get hard. When things get hard, it's usually because one of these blocks has come up to play. Which moves me to the fourth step in this process, which is to emotionally charge intentions or your goals by bringing it into the body and allowing yourself to feel the emotions of what it would be like to have that goal. This is where visualization comes in. And again, this is all backed by neuroscience, right? If you look at studies around very accomplished athletes. Michael Phelps will tell you that when he's got his earphones in and he's sitting there with his eyes closed before a swim, he's visualizing not only every stroke, but how he's going to feel coming across that finish line as the victor. And that emotion, that emotionally charged visualization of success is what gives him the passion and the drive to actually perform. So emotionally charging your attention by bringing it into the body, allowing yourself to feel what it feels like to accomplish this is an important step. As a part of my I Map It process, I created a planner, and I've had my group clients periodically go through and utilize this planner for those who say that they benefit from a planner. And every single day, I have them write down what their quarterly goal is. Every day. Now, it feels redundant, but doing that, touching your goal every single day and reminding yourself every single day of what you're doing and why you're doing it is such an important step in goal achievement. My client today mentioned that for 2 years, she listened to this podcast every single day and visualized meeting me. And then in January of 2025, she attended Brew and she met Dawn and I at the Brew annual planning conference. And now she's in a coaching container, continuing to work with us. But that started 2 years ago when my voice was in her ear and she was envisioning us meeting for the very first time. What this does by visualizing, bringing it into the body, feeling the accomplishment, is it activates something called the reticular activating system, otherwise known as the RAS. Now, this system is a super important system to the brain, and the reason is that we are bombarded with 11 billion bits of information in every moment. We're bombarded every day with more information than our ancestors were in their entire lives. Like, it's insane. And so how do we as humans process all this information successfully without going absolutely bonkers? And the reticular activating system is what does this. It essentially breaks down consciousness into two sections, your subconscious and your conscious. Your subconscious is scanning the environment, all 11 bits of information at all times. And it'll then kick up to the conscious, which can only process about 40 to 50 bits of information per second. Anything that is relevant. Well, how does it decide what's relevant? It decides what's relevant by seeking and scanning the environment at all times for the things that you have decided were important, or the things that you wanted, or the things that you have identified as being something that you're scared of. So something that you desire or something that you fear. And it's going to scan the environment at all times, and it's going to kick things up and say, hey, you said you wanted this, or hey, you said you were worried about this, right? And so if you're not telling your RAS system what to look for, it doesn't just go in sleep mode. It will listen to the outside environment as to what's important. And now you're being influenced. The news is going to tell it what it needs to look for. Social media is going to tell it what it needs to look for. Your parents, your religion, all of those things are going to program your RAS system as to what's important and what you're afraid of instead of you telling it what is necessary and important for you to achieve your biggest goals in life. So we want to take back the power and use our RAS system intentionally by being very clear on what we're aiming for, what our goals are, what we want to feel like, and what we want to do. So the first step here is to reclaim your power to focus. The second step is to clarify exactly what you want. The third step is to identify and bring awareness to the blocks that come up when you state what you want. And then the fourth thing is to emotionally charge your intentions by bringing it into the body through visualization and in regularly looking at and touching the goal itself. The fifth step here is to take passionate and intuitively led action. Now, a lot of manifestation techniques get you through the first four, and then we just expect you to lay back and let it happen. And that is not how we do things. Neuroscientifically, we get in life what we act upon. Sure, you'll get lucky, some things will get given to you, but in almost all cases, quote unquote, luck follows effort. So after you've identified what you want and where you're going, now we need to take confident action in the direction of those goals. And the reason I mentioned that we take passionate and intuitively led action is because your subconscious, again, we talked about that with the RAS system, is not conscious to you. It does not speak the language of words or logic. It speaks the language of emotions. It speaks the language of senses. And so when you get a gut feeling about something, it is your subconscious, which, by the way, is processing 11 billion bits of information per second, way more than your conscious mind can catch up with. And so when you're intuitively led, you're essentially listening to the 11 billion bits of information before you're listening to the 40 or 50 that it had the ability to kick up to your logic and conscious brain. So being intuitively led enables you to take action utilizing a much vaster system of information. And then the last step, so step 6 here, and this is the hardest, it's the hardest, is to let go of any attachment to what the end goal looks like. Okay? Yes, we've been visualizing the feelings and sensations of what it feels like to achieve this goal, but we don't get to tell it when, and we don't get to tell it how. We can only focus on the what and the why, and then hope that all of the pieces fall together. And each one of us has proof in our own story as to how this plays out. You know, I had this goal, I didn't know what it was going to look like, but looking back, this is better than I could have even imagined. Or I had this goal of being this place, and I never got to this place, but I got to this place, and holy moly, that's so much further, so much better than anything I could have even imagined. Or it took me longer than I ever imagined to get here, but being here is everything I dreamed and more. And so we don't get to choose what it looks like. We don't get to choose how we get there, but we do get to choose what we're focusing on and why we're focusing on it. We just keep our eyes focused on the goal and we let the how flow. So real quick, just to recap, we're going to reclaim our ability to focus. We're going to clarify what we want. We're going to identify and bring awareness to blocks that come up along the way. We're going to emotionally charge our intentions by bringing it into the body and utilizing the tools of visualization and touching those goals every day. We're going to take passionate and intuitively led action. And we're going to let go of attachment to what it looks like, how we get there, and when we get there. I'm going to close out this episode by extending an invitation. If you've been listening to this podcast for 2 years plus or for 2 days plus, and you have been dreaming about working with me on a one-to-one basis, I don't often open up that opportunity for people, but after the call that I had today, it made me realize that not everybody wants a group setting and not everybody wants the academy. And so if you're out there and you're like, Sarah, I just want to work with you and you don't currently have any public offerings to do that, reach out. You can reach me at sarah@mobilebevpros.com or hello@mobilebevpros.com, and let's have a conversation, because working with people to achieve their biggest goals is literally my greatest work in the world, and I would love to do more of it, and I would love to do it for you. Thank you for another great episode, and I'll see you again next week. And that wraps up today's episode. I hope it was valuable. I would love to hear from you what you thought. You can drop me a line at hello@mobilebevpros.com or find me on Instagram @mobilebevpros. If you're looking for more valuable mobile bar related content, we have a website full of it. You can find us at www.mobilebevpros.com. And I'd love to see you in our Facebook community, also by the name of, you guessed it, Mobile Bev Pros. Thank you for joining me today, and until next time, cheers.